over 90 minutes of music. And it was a lavish movie, an expensive movie.
The year is 2006, a film that spent 25 years in development hell, surviving 3 collapsed productions, outliving 2 of its key creative minds, and enduring nearly 800 casting auditions, finally makes it to the big screen. It earns 8 Academy Award nominations, more than any other film released that year, and then the Academy tells it to go home empty-handed. But that's not even the strangest part. The strangest part is everything that happened before a single frame was ever shot. The battles fought behind closed doors, the A-list stars who walked away, the ones who stayed and nearly fell apart in the process, and the real woman buried beneath the story, the one whose truth the film ultimately couldn't bring itself to fully tell. Stay with me, because by the time we reach fact number 21, you are going to see this movie in a completely different light. These are 21 strange and fascinating facts about Dreamgirls, and some of them have never been properly laid out until now. Fact 1. The film took 25 years to reach a theater and almost didn't survive 3 separate times. To understand what this movie is, you first have to understand what it nearly wasn't. The original Broadway production of Dreamgirls opened at the Imperial Theater on December 20th, 1981. It was directed and choreographed by Michael Bennett, the same visionary who had already reshaped American musical theater with A Chorus Line. The show ran for 1,521 performances. It was a cultural phenomenon, and from almost the very first night the curtain rose, Hollywood came knocking. Producer David Geffen held the film rights. Over the next 2.5 decades, 3 separate production attempts were launched. 3 of them collapsed, 2 in spectacular fashion. The version that audiences finally saw in 2006 was the 4th attempt at making this film. 25 years, 3 failed versions, 1 movie. And here's what makes that timeline feel even heavier. The director who deserved most to make it never lived to see it happen. By the time cameras finally rolled, he had been gone for nearly 19 years. Fact 2. The director who built the show died before the film could be made. Michael Bennett didn't simply direct Dreamgirls on Broadway, he constructed it from the ground up. He designed the staging, the emotional architecture, the entire way the story moved through its audience. After the show became a sensation, Bennett held firmly to his intention of directing the film adaptation. He wanted it made, he worked toward it, he never got there. Bennett died on July 2, 1987. He was 44 years old. The cause was AIDS-related lymphoma, a disease that swept through an entire generation of artists during that decade. Howard Ashman, who would later become attached to the second attempt at the film, died of the same illness just 4 years later. The 2006 film closes with a dedication to Michael Bennett. His name appears in the credits of a movie he never made, a quiet tribute to a film he never stopped wanting to create. That dedication isn't a footnote, it's the entire story compressed into a single line of text. Fact 3. Whitney Houston killed the first attempt by demanding to sing Effie's songs. After Bennett's death, Geffen moved quickly. He brought in Howard Ashman, the lyricist who would go on to define a generation of Disney animation through The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, to write the screenplay. The project was being built around one undeniable star. Whitney Houston was set to play Deena Jones. On paper, that made complete sense. Houston in the late 1980s was arguably the most powerful female voice in popular music. Her casting felt like destiny. But Houston wanted more than the role of Deena. She wanted Effie's songs. Specifically, she wanted And I Am Telling You I'm Not Going, the second-act showstopper that isn't just the emotional spine of the musical, it's the entire reason the show exists. Reassigning that number to Deena would have been like pulling the engine out of a car and dropping it in the trunk. The entire architecture of Dreamgirls is built around Effie delivering that moment. Geffen refused. Houston wouldn't budge. The negotiation collapsed entirely. Then Ashman died in 1991, leaving the project with no writer, no star agreement, and no workable script. The first attempt was finished. Whitney Houston walked away from what could have been one of the defining performances of her career, and she walked because she wanted someone else's spotlight. Fact 4. Joel Schumacher almost made it in the late 1990s with Lauryn Hill and Kelly Price. The project didn't stay buried. It never does when the money is real. By the late 1990s, Warner Brothers had acquired the film rights and attached director Joel Schumacher, coming off Batman Forever and A Time to Kill, to lead a second full attempt. This version took the casting in a dramatically different direction. Instead of Whitney Houston, the role of Dina was set to go to Lauryn Hill, who was coming off The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, one of the most culturally dominant albums of that entire decade. R&B powerhouse Kelly Price was attached to play Effie. Think about that for a moment. Lauryn Hill in 1998 was at the absolute peak of her influence. Kelly Price had a voice built precisely for this kind of material. The version that could have existed is genuinely worth mourning. But then Warner Brothers released the Frankie Lyman biopic Why Do Fools Fall in Love in 1998. It failed at the box office. The studio interpreted the result as evidence that musical biopics no longer had commercial viability and shelved Dreamgirls indefinitely. Two completely assembled casts, Houston's version and then Hill's, had been built and discarded for the same film. At that point, the idea of Dreamgirls as an unmakeable movie was starting to feel less like bad luck and more like a pattern. Fact 5. Bill Condon auditioned 783 actresses for the role of Effie White. When director Bill Condon finally secured the rights and began production in earnest, the search for Effie White became one of the most exhaustive casting processes in modern Hollywood history. 6 months, 783 auditions. Let that number sit for a moment. The role demanded someone who could carry the dramatic weight of the entire film, deliver one of the most vocally demanding performances ever written for the Broadway stage, and hold her own in scenes alongside Beyonce, Eddie Murphy, and Jamie Foxx. The casting team searched everywhere. Early frontrunners included Fantasia Barranino, who had just won American Idol the previous year. Former Disney star Raven-Symoné auditioned. Broadway veterans Carpathia Jenkins and Patina Miller were both in the running. Even actress Yvette Nickel-Brown, who would later earn wide recognition through the television series Community, came in before being redirected to a smaller role as Curtis Taylor's legal secretary. Jennifer Hudson auditioned multiple times. She was not the obvious choice. Condon has openly admitted he wasn't immediately certain about the decision. He ultimately chose Hudson because, in his own words,
he simply didn't believe any of the others. The 784th audition was the one that convinced him. Fact 6. Jennifer Hudson was a 7th-place American Idol finalist who had been performing on a Disney cruise ship. This is the part of the story that sounds like it was scripted, which, given the circumstances, feels entirely fitting. In 2004, Jennifer Hudson finished 7th on Season 3 of American Idol. Not a winner, not even a top 5 finisher. The season belonged to Fantasia Barranino, who walked away with the title, the recording contract, and the tour. Hudson left the competition with no agent, no manager, and no guaranteed path forward. She kept working. She took whatever opportunities were available, including a stretch performing as a character on a Disney cruise ship. That is literally where Jennifer Hudson was between American Idol and Dreamgirls, singing on a ship in the middle of the ocean. When the Dreamgirls casting opened in 2005, both Hudson and Fantasia Barranino came in to audition for the same role. The American Idol winner was considered the early favorite. The casting team was initially leaning in her direction. Hudson auditioned multiple times before Condon ultimately chose her instead. Fantasia called Hudson after the decision was made and joked, in what Hudson described as a genuinely warm conversation, that Hudson had stolen her part. The Idol winner didn't get the role. The 7th-place finisher did. and the 7th-place finisher went home with the Academy Award. Fact 8. Beyonce lost 20 pounds in 14 days using the master plans. The Dina Jones that audiences see at the end of Dreamgirls is not the same woman they meet at the beginning. The story spans roughly 20 decades, and Beyonce was asked to portray her character at 16 and again at 36, with both age ranges filmed just 2 weeks apart. Rather than rely entirely on makeup and costuming to create the physical transformation, Beyonce decided to change her body during that window. She followed what is known as the Master Cleanse, sometimes called the lemonade diet. The entire regimen comes down to 4 ingredients: lemon juice, maple syrup, cayenne pepper, and water. No solid food, just that mixture consumed 6 to 12 times daily for the duration of the cleanse. Beyoncé lost 20 pounds in 14 days. She has spoken about it publicly on multiple occasions, including in an interview with Oprah where she confirmed every detail, while also being clear that she would never recommend it to anyone outside of a film production setting with proper medical supervision. After the shoot wrapped, she gained the weight back almost immediately. The discipline required to do what she did inside a 2-week filming window is something most people wouldn't survive past day 3. Fact 9. Bill Condon made Jennifer Hudson deliberately act rude and show up on set on purpose. Effie White is one of the most demanding characters ever written for an American musical. She is late, hot-tempered, unapologetic, and completely convinced of her own worth, even as the world around her works to dismantle it. Jennifer Hudson, by every account from the production, is none of those things. She is warm, professional, and genuinely considerate of the people around her. So Condon made her become Effie before filming ever began. After the main rehearsal period wrapped just before Christmas 2005, Condon called Hudson back for a separate week of one-on-one sessions. That week had nothing to do with line readings or blocking. It was about behavior. Condon instructed Hudson to deliberately be rude to people on set and off. He told her to arrive late on purpose. He wanted her so completely inside Effie's personality that the performance wouldn't require her to act it. It would simply require her to be it. Hudson followed the direction. She was rude on purpose. She showed up late on purpose. People on the production who didn't know what was happening were genuinely thrown off by her behavior. That confusion.
Fact 12. Costume designer Sharon Davis built 120 dresses by hand for the 3 lead actresses. The visual identity of Dreamgirls, that particular brand of sequined, era-specific glamour, did not arrive by accident. Sharon Davis built it from the ground up. The scope of what the production required was enormous. The story spans 13 years. It moves through multiple distinct eras of American music. It follows 3 women whose look has to evolve from amateur talent show contestants to international superstars over the course of 2 hours. Davis designed and built 120 original dresses for the principal actresses alone. That number does not include the dozens of suits she designed for the male leads. Her reference points were deliberately wider than the obvious Motown touchstones. She drew from Cher, from Aretha Franklin, from Prince, from Marvin Gaye. The blended influences gave the costumes a heightened, performance-driven quality that pushed the film beyond simple period reproduction into something far more expressive. Bill Condon publicly called Davis one of the film's primary storytellers. Her work earned her an Oscar nomination for costume design. Every silhouette, every shoulder line, and every sequined gown that audiences associate with this film passed through her shop. Fact 13. Eddie Murphy won every major precursor award before Norbit destroyed his campaign. For most of the 2007 award season, the Best Supporting Actor Oscar was not a competition, it was a formality. Eddie Murphy's performance as James Thunder Hurley had produced the kind of critical and industry reception that most performers spend an entire career chasing. He won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor on January 15, 2007, beating Jack Nicholson, Brad Pitt, and Mark Wahlberg. He won the Critics' Choice Award. He won the Screen Actors Guild Award. He received his Academy Award nomination. The category appeared sealed. Then, on February 9, 2007, 16 days before the Oscar ceremony, Norbit opened in theaters. The comedy starred Murphy in multiple roles, including a fatsuit performance as an overbearing character named Raspucha. The reviews were catastrophic. Critics described the film as racially insensitive, mean-spirited, and aggressively unfunny. It scored 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. The industry conversation around Murphy shifted overnight. The man who had seemed untouchable 2 weeks earlier was now the punchline of the entire awards cycle. Alan Arkin won the Oscar for Little Miss Sunshine. Murphy lost every vote he had spent 6 months building. The phrase, the Norbit effect, has since entered Hollywood vocabulary as permanent shorthand for detonating your own awards campaign. No single film has more completely defined how a poorly received comedy can retroactively collapse a serious dramatic performance. Fact 15. Dreamgirls received 8 Oscar nominations, more than any film that year, and was not nominated for Best Picture. Read that again. Dreamgirls led the entire field at the 79th Academy Awards in total nominations, 8. More than any other film released in 2006. The nominations spanned Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Sound Mixing, and 3 nominations for Best Original Song, 3 songs from the same film competing in the same category. Not one of those 8 nominations was for Best Picture. The 5 films nominated in that category were Babel, The Departed, Letters to Iwo Jima, Little Miss Sunshine, and The Queen. The Departed won. Every single one of those films received fewer total nominations than Dreamgirls. The film that led the Academy's own ballot in total nominations was simultaneously told it was not one of the 5 best films of the year. Of its 8 nominations, Dreamgirls won 2, Jennifer Hudson for Best Supporting Actress and Best Sound Mixing. The omission from the Best Picture category remains one of the most debated exclusions in Oscar history. It shaped conversations about what the Academy was willing to fully recognize and what it would acknowledge but stop short of celebrating. Fact 16. Diana Ross refused to watch the film. The character of Dina Jones is widely understood to be a fictionalized version of Diana Ross. The character of Curtis Taylor Jr. maps closely onto Motown founder Berry Gordy Jr., with whom Ross had a long professional and personal relationship. The story of the Dreams mirrors the story of the Supremes, including the way Florence Ballard was sidelined and replaced in 1967. In April 2007, 4 months after the film opened and collected its awards, Diana Ross gave an interview to the Detroit News. She said she had not seen the film and did not intend to. She publicly distanced herself from the project and described it as not her story. That is a statement worth sitting with. The most decorated female solo artist in Motown history, the woman whose career and relationships formed the emotional foundation of the entire film, chose not to watch it. She had spent decades carefully building and controlling the narrative of her